A Pair of Friends by Alexander Maclaren. Can two walk together, except they be agreed? Amos 3, verse 3. They do not need to be agreed about everything. They must, however, wish to keep each other's company, and they must be going by the same road to the same place. The application of the parable is very plain, though there are differences of opinion as to the bearing of the whole context, which need not concern us now. The two whom the prophet would fain see walking together are God and Israel, and his question suggests not only the companionship and communion with God, which are the highest form of religion and the aim of all forms and ceremonies of worship, but also the inexorable condition on which alone that height of communion can be secured and sustained. Two may walk together, though the one be God in heaven and the other be I in England. But they have to be agreed, thus far at any rate, that both shall wish to be together, and both be going the same road. 1. So I ask you to look first at that possible blessed companionship which may cheer a life. There are 3 phrases in the Old Testament, very like each other, and yet presenting different facets or aspects of the same great truth. Sometimes we read about walking before God, as Abraham was bid to do. That means ordering the daily life under the continual sense that we are ever in the great taskmaster's eye. Then there is walking after God, and that means conforming the will and active efforts to the rule that He has laid down, setting our steps firm on the paths that He has prepared that we should walk in them, and accepting His providences. But also, high above these conceptions of a devout life is the one which is suggested by my text, and which, as you remember, was realized in the case of the patriarch Enoch, walking with God. For to walk before Him may have with it some tremor, and may be undertaken in the spirit of the slave, who would be glad to get away from the jealous eye that rebukes his slothfulness. And walking after Him may be a painful and partial effort to keep His distant figure in sight. But to walk with Him implies a constant, quiet sense of His divine presence, which forbids that I should ever be lonely, which guides and defends, which floods my soul and fills my life, and in which, as the companions pace along side by side, words may be spoken by either, or blessed silence may be eloquent of perfect trust and rest. But, dear brother, far above as such experience seems to sound, such a life is a possibility for every one of us. We may be able to say, as truly as our Lord said it, I am not alone, for the Father is with me. It is possible that the dreariest solitude of a soul, such as is not realized when the body is removed from men, but is felt most in the crowded city, where there is none that loves or fathoms and sympathizes, may be turned into blessed fellowship with Him. Yes, but that solitude will not be so turned unless it is first painfully felt. As Daniel said, I was left alone, and I saw the great vision. We need to feel in our deepest hearts that loneliness on earth before we walk with God. If we are so walking, it is no piece of fanaticism to say that there will be mutual communications. Do you not believe that God knows His way into the spirits that He has endowed with conscious life? Do you believe that He speaks now to people as truly as He did to prophets and apostles of old? As truly, though the results of His speech to us of today be not of the same authority for others as the words that he spoke to a Paul or a John. The belief in God's communications as forever sounding in the depths of the Christian spirit does not at all obliterate the distinction between the kind of inspiration which produced the New Testament and that which is realized by all believing and obedient souls. High above all our experience of hearing the words of God in our hearts stands that of those holy men of old who heard God's message whispered in their ears, that they might proclaim it on the housetops to all the world through all generations. But though they and we are on a different level, and God spoke to them for a different purpose, He speaks in our spirits if we will comply with the conditions as truly as He did in theirs. As really as it was ever true that the Lord spoken to Abraham, or Isaiah, or Paul, it is true that He now speaks to the man that walks with Him. Frank speech on both sides beguiles many a weary mile, when lovers or friends foot it side by side. And this pair of friends, of whom our text speaks, have mutual intercourse. God speaks with His servant now, as of old, as a man speaketh with his friend. And we on our parts, if we are truly walking with Him, shall feel it natural to speak frankly to God. As two friends on the road will interchange remarks about trifles, and if they love each other, the remarks about the trifles will be weighted with love. So we can tell our smallest affairs to God, and if we have Him for our pilgrim companion, we do not need to lock up any troubles or concerns of any sort, big or little, in our hearts, but may speak them all to our friend who goes with us. The two may walk together. That is the end of all religion. What are creeds for? What are services and sacraments for? What is theology for? What is Christ's redeeming act for? All culminate in this true, constant fellowship between men and God. And unless in some measure that result is arrived at in our cases, our religion, let it be as orthodox as you like. Our faith in the redemption of Jesus Christ, let it be as real as you will. Our attendances on services and sacraments, let them be as punctilious and regular as may be, are all sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. Get side by side with God. That is the purpose of all these. And fellowship with Him is the climax of all religion. It is also the secret of all blessedness, the only thing that will make a life absolutely sovereign over sorrow, and fixedly unperturbed by all tempests, and invulnerable to all the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Hold fast by God, and you have an amulet against every evil, and a shield against every foe, and a mighty power that will calm and satisfy your whole being. Nothing else will do so. As Augustine said, O God, Thou hast made us for Thyself, and in Thyself only are we at rest. If the Shepherd is with us, we will fear no evil. 2. Now, a word in the next place as to the sadly incomplete reality in much Christian experience, which contrasts with this possibility. I'm afraid that very, very few so-called Christian people habitually feel, as they might do, the depth and blessedness of this communion. And sure I am that only a very small percentage of us have anything like the continuity of companionship which my text suggests as possible. There may be, and therefore there should be, running unbroken through a Christian life, one long, bright line of communion with God, and happy inspiration from the sense of His presence with us? Is it a line in my life? Or is there but a dot here and a dot there, and long breaks between? The long, embarrassed pauses in a conversation between two who do not know much of or care much for each other are only too like what occurs in many professing Christians' intercourse with God. Their communion is like those time-worn inscriptions that archaeologists dig up, with a word clearly cut and then a great gap, and then a letter or two, and then another gap, and then a little bit more legible, and then the stone broken, and all the rest gone. Did you ever read the meteorological reports in the newspapers and observe a record like this? 20 minutes, sunshine, out of a possible 8 hours. Do you not think that such a state of affairs is a little like the experience of a great many Christian people in regard to their communion with God? It is broken at the best, and imperfect at the completest, and shallow at the deepest. Oh, dear brethren, rise to the height of your possibilities and live as close to God as He lets you live, and nothing will much trouble you. 3. And now, lastly, a word about the simple explanation of the failure to realize this continual presence. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Certainly not. Our fathers in a sterner and more religious age than ours used to be greatly troubled how to account for a state of Christian experience, which they supposed to be due to God's withdrawing of the sense of His presence from His children. Whether there is any such withdrawal or not, I am quite certain that that is not the cause of the interrupted communion between God and the average Christian man. I make all allowance for the ups and downs and changing moods which necessarily affect us in this present life. And I make all allowances, too, for the pressure of imperative duties and distracting cares which interfere with our communion, though if we were as strong as we might be, they would not wile us away from, but drive us to our Father in heaven. But when all such allowances have been made, I come back to my text as the explanation of interrupted communion. The two are not agreed, and that is why they are not walking together. The consciousness of God's presence with us is a very delicate thing. It is like a very sensitive thermometer, which will drop when an iceberg is a league off over the sea and scarcely visible. We do not wish His company, or we are not in harmony with His thoughts, or we are not going His road, and therefore, of course, we part. At bottom, there is only one thing that separates a soul from God, and that is sin. Sin of some sort, like tiny grains of dust that get between two polished plates in an engine, that ought to move smoothly and closely against each other. The obstruction may be invisible, and yet be powerful enough to cause friction, which hinders the working of the engine and throws everything out of gear. A light cloud that we cannot see may come between us and a star, and we shall only know it is there because the star is not visibly there. Similarly, many a Christian, quite unconsciously, has something or other in his habits or in his conduct or in his affections which would reveal itself to him if he would look as being wrong because it blots out God. Let us remember that very little divergence will, if the two paths are prolonged far enough, part their other ends by a world. Our way may go off from the ways of the Lord at a very acute angle. There may be scarcely any consciousness of parting company at the beginning. Let the man travel on upon it far enough, and the two will be so far apart that he cannot see God or hear him speak. Take care of the little divergencies, which are habitual, for their accumulated results will be complete separation. There must be absolute surrender if there is to be uninterrupted fellowship. Such then is the direction in which we are to look for the reasons for our low and broken experiences of communion with God. Oh, dear friends, when we do as we sometimes do, wake with a start, like a child that all at once starts from sleep and finds that its mother is gone. When we wake with a start to feel that we are alone, then do not let us be afraid to go straight back. Only be sure that we leave behind us the sin that parted us. You remember how Peter signalized himself on the lake, on the occasion of the second miraculous draught of fishes, when he floundered through the water and clasped Christ's feet. He did not say then, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." He had said that before on a similar occasion, when he felt his sin less. But now he knew that the best place for the denier was with his head on Christ's bosom. So if we have parted from our friend, there should be no time lost ere we go back. May it be true of us that we walk with God, so that at last the great promise may be fulfilled about us, that we shall walk with him in white, being by his love accounted worthy, and so follow and keep company with the Lamb whithersoever he goeth.